We were live once, and we're like, "Are we live?" We are live, as it's what it's telling me. So, hopefully, we are live. All right, folks. Thank you very much for joining us today for our next LinkedIn Live. And today we have 3 guests. I'll introduce them in just a minute when we have more audience here. And really, our goal today is to talk about. Camera's all messed up now. How marketers can grow their influence. And so we're thinking both from, obviously I think about this from a marketing firm, how do we grow our influence, but also just as an internal, if you're a company and you work at a company and you're a marketer, how can you grow your influence? It's not common. I actually was shocked the other day. I was doing some prospecting and I found somebody who went up through the marketing pipeline, was a CEO of a middle-sized company. Typically, that is not what I see. And so I think that's one of the reasons people are here. So if you are joining us as a guest today, if you wouldn't mind typing in chat and doing a quick greeting and saying hi, letting us know that we are actually live and that there are people out in the world, which is totally how this works. Like last time we weren't live, we were live. Brooke is telling me, it sent me a message that says we're actually live. So as people join us, we will get started with this. And I am not going to introduce you guys just for a minute or two. We're not even actually technically started yet. We'll wait till people kind of file in. So, yeah. Why don't we do, I'm trying to think. There's Marilyn typing good morning. Okay.
Could you hear my keyboard?
Yes, we could. Yeah, this is how it is. She loves clacky keyboards, and so they pop out. All right, I'm seeing more comments, so something somewhere. There we go. I was on the wrong tab. So we have Bill Caskey, one of my favorite people on the planet.
Bill.
If you need sales training, Bill is the guy. He has some really good groups for that. We have a anonymous LinkedIn user that says they're hi, and then Nico, I think, has also greeted us. And so if you people, and then Kelly Greathouse, go ahead. I appreciate you saying hi. Tell us who you are, where you are, and what you do, what company you're at. Give us a quick intro. This is your chance to be out in the world.
You know, I feel like Andrew McMasters and Bill Caskey should have a coffee.
Uh-oh.
Okay.
It just occurred to me.
All right, Bill Caskey, you're in the chat. You're going to get an intro to Andrew. We'll make it happen. And that'll work. And hey, Gail, good. I hope your daughter feels better. I'm sorry, she's not feeling well. All right, folks, let's get started. I'm going to introduce our panel. I'm going to share my screen a little bit here. And I'm going to introduce our panel, and we'll get started. Welcome to Grow Your Marketers, Grow Your Influence. Get a seat at the table. I think this includes salespeople to some degree. And our topic today really comes from a place. We were on our last webinar. There were 2 things that happened. First, in our last webinar, we were having a conversation with 700 miles east. I love it, Bill. We were having a conversation and somebody piped in and they basically said, look, how do I get my essentially the C-suite to take me seriously? I really want to measure what we're doing. I want to make an impact at this firm. And this is a 500 person firm, so they're not small. I want to make a difference. And this person felt like they kind of got a pat on the head, told to keep doing what they were doing, but not taken seriously. And I was like, oh, that's not good. Let's we need to have a conversation about that. And then the day before, I got an email from a friend, and I will not name you. You're probably on this as well. He sent me an email, and it was more, he's actually a fan of marketing and sales, but his comment was that it's a little bit of a counter narrative, this idea that marketing is only necessary when your product stinks, which I disagree with, because I think then you get the word out about the product, a lot of people buy it, a lot of people figure out it stinks, and then you've just wasted a bunch of money. Definitely fix your product before you start marketing it, is my perspective. Terry from Columbus, Ohio, it looks like Millcraft. Great to see you, Terry. All right, Michael Morton, we've got a couple other people in there. All right, let me introduce our panel today. So first we have Andrew McMasters, who is very used to being on the stage. In fact, he's on a stage now. I believe behind him is a stage curtain. Right, there you go. And so he is the owner of ImprovMindset. He is an actor, director, and entrepreneur with over 30 years experience in the arts. He founded Jet City Improv about 25 years ago, and he's worked for multiple Fortune 500 companies, including Amazon, Microsoft, GE, Hasbro, Google, Valve, Nike, and Apple. And his company and he provides presentation support and messaging, as well as team building and communications. And that's why I wanted him here. Is I think he's a comedian, so he's going to give us something to laugh at today. The pressure's on. And then you can see You can see Brooke has shared his link in LinkedIn Live. If you're in the audience, want to connect with him, you definitely should. He's a great guy, but he does presentation support and communications. And I thought, gosh, he's going to have insight into like larger companies around how they think about marketing and what happens there. And if you don't, you still can make us laugh, and that's all good.
There we go.
Then we have Travis Williams. Travis is the CEO of Distributor Wire Cable. He is a graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy, holds a master's degree from the University of San Diego, and then he is captain in the U.S. Navy, still a captain in the U.S. Navy, and has multiple combat deployments. So thank you for your service. What he doesn't mention is, I think you were, was it a wide receiver for, I can't remember.
Yes. Yeah, I played in the NFL for a few years. Yep.
That's very cool. So yeah, so not in your bio. Apparently, they're worried about you're worried about concussions, giving you a bio. All right, then we have Craig Cook, CMO of Business Solution Partners. And Craig is inclusive, visionary leader on the forefront of the MarTech revolution. And Craig, I got to tell you, my heart goes out to you because the MarTech revolution is nonstop, and trying to just keep up with. I was on a call the other day and they would ask me, what's the challenge in marketing today? I said, one of the challenges is just to figure out how the tech works, because it shifts so constantly. There's something like 6,000 different startups or 9,000 different startups that offer services to help you market your company. So he has 20 years experience deploying content-first marketing initiatives, which is near and dear to our heart in the mid-market and enterprise space. And he's the CMO of business, as the CMO of Business Solution Partners. Craig is responsible for educating consumers about SaaS products like Oracle NetSuite, designed to help organizations streamline, process, and automate everyday operations. That is so cool. We have to have another conversation, even at LinkedIn Live, on that. All right, so everybody's LinkedIn is there. I am going to move us forward just a little bit. We're not going to spend a lot of time on that. My name is Mike Black. You can already see me here. I'm the CEO and managing partner of Page Black, and we're an integrated marketing firm. We have to talk about us a little bit, I suppose. We have Marilyn Haywood Page, who's our CMO, and she is the person that comes up with all of our strategies and makes sure that things happen. Quickly, Page Black. Our vision is to inspire companies to do the very best work. And then our mission, and this, we don't take this lightly, it's really to help business leaders leverage marketing to reach their goals. And so sometimes when we're brought in by companies and they ask questions around, like, they really don't have goals, and then it's hard for us to engage, because we really do want to understand what are their business goals, not just marketing. We will engage on recruiting and things like that. How do we put your website, put your team on the website, or your employment page on your website, whatever that is, so that we can help you reach your goals. All right. Next is save a date, and Brooke's going to share a link. May 11th, we're going to talk about strategic lead generation for the middle market company. What we're thinking about there is complicated sales. You have influencers, multiple stakeholders. How do you generate the right leads, build the right influence, call on the right people? So some of that's going to be sales oriented, and some of that's going to be marketing oriented. So that's May 11th, 10 a.m. Mountain, 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern. The link is there, or it will be if it's not. Brooke is catching up with us, as maybe there's a lag on the video, but we will not hold back. Here is our first question for the panel. And if you're in the audience today and you have a question, then please enter it and we will make sure we get it entered. And so we did this from a leadership perspective. And so, Andrew, I know you don't necessarily lead marketing teams or run a company, but you translate that into what you see leaders. There you go. Okay.
Have you ever tried to lead actors? It's like herding cats.
Oh, dear Lord.
It's true.
It's herding cats. Okay. So, but that said, let's keep moving forward. Andrew, since we are on you, what do you think that is happening? What are you seeing where marketing is falling short, or people have this expectation of marketing? What are your thoughts on that?
For me, it's always been that sense of, and actually I'm on the boards for a couple different community groups, sort of building community within areas, leadership and development and economic development. And the one thing that I always see that I think the marketing always feels to me like it's reactive, as opposed to actually being in the forefront and telling the story about what it is you want the narrative to be. I feel like it's always that reactive to the narrative as opposed to controlling the narrative. And so that sort of has been my big push right now for how do we continue to stay in front of this and keep those messages moving forward, as opposed to suddenly always being like, oh, we're going to react to these things and we'll react to these things and this is how we'll react to it. And it drives me insane that I'm the only person on a $1.5 million organization that basically is running all this service programs, and they're like, well, marketing's not important. And I'm like, yes, it is. Thanks. Like, you're doing this great work. You're cleaning up the neighborhood. You're doing economic development, but you're not telling anyone about it. And if you're not telling anyone, why bother?
Yes. And that's that is both one, it's almost a symptom of what we're talking about. In some ways, it's this idea, and that's the business consequence of that is you're down the line. Because for marketing to be effective, you need to be ahead of it 3 months ahead of time, at least.
Yeah.
And if you're reacting, it's going to take you 3 months to catch up, and then it's over anyways.
Exactly.
It's all gone. So Craig, Marilyn mentioned your name as a part of this, and I'm really looking forward to your answers to these questions in particular, because you've kind of navigated this journey as it went, pre kind of digital to digital, and the shift and onset of measurement. It used to be kind of back before I did marketing, back before maybe any of us did marketing. You could count on it because you did a commercial that drive a ton of sales, but you had no idea what actually worked because there was no measurement. It wasn't possible. You just knew that when you did the ads, it worked. So Craig, what's your perspective on what are business leaders looking for from marketing, and they're just not seeing it?
Yeah, I think there's 2 points that I'd like to make about this specific question. Number one is I'd like to see marketing shift from telling the brand story to telling the customer story. I think that's a really important aspect of our future in this business. I spent the last 4 or 5 years kind of building the brand for my company. And now it's time to take that shift and to start talking about not our success, but our customers' success, right? Mm-hmm. So I think it's really important that, we're closing the feedback loop between what we are doing as a company and what the results are in the marketplace. And I think the second piece of the puzzle here for marketers is that it's now time to start establishing a deeper connection between sales and customer service, and closing that feedback loop from the customers and the outreach to reflect back to the product teams as well. So we're moving more into an operations mode in marketing than we are necessarily in advertising and publishing. The role has grown such that if we're not touching all aspects of the buyer's journey, from the prospecting all the way through, closing that customer and then continuing to delight them year after year after year by adding value into the relationship, then we're really missing out on the big picture. So my advice is get out of the bubble and get more collaborative, both within your organization and exterior with the customers that your organization services.
Absolutely. Hear a bit of brand story around kind of that piece, or I think it's story brand, whatever that is, where you're making the customer the hero. I really like when we are prospecting, I actually actively look at the website. Do they talk about how great they are? Or do they talk about what their customers' problems and how they solve them? And those are vastly different approaches. And I really like solving customers' problems instead. So I love that. I appreciate that. And I love the idea of having marketing support across the entire customer journey, from creating awareness to offboarding. How do you offboard a customer that's leaving, from the perspective that you then have a chance to go back and do business with them further? And at the same time, also, maybe you just maybe you're going to get referrals from them because it just doesn't fit anymore, maybe. So
yeah, churn is going to happen. What do we do with it, right?
That's right. Yeah. And it's admitting it to yourself. So, all right. So Travis, what is your perspective as a CEO? What are you looking for from marketing that you're not seeing? You don't need necessarily to out anything on your team, but just your perspective on what you're seeing more as a company.
Yeah, sure thing. So it's in line with what Craig was talking about there. I am looking for kind of a holistic application of the tools that a marketer has. And so a lot of times we're thinking external, external, sell the company, that kind of thing. But there's also, if you're looking to be more important to me as a CEO, it's about applying those skills, those tools, to not just external, but internal, and really understanding the goals of the business, right? So yeah, certainly you're helping sales, and you've got to have sales. You've got to understand your customer, but there's so much more to a company than just maybe just the external message. So that internal message and leveraging some of those skills, and I say internal, I mean, it really is that cross collaboration, understanding what an operations department might need. I'm in a heavy industrial industry. And so a lot of humans work within my company. And so those folks being highly connected to our message as a company is very, very important. How do we achieve our goals if only our sales team is aligned with what we're putting out there? So it's very much applying these things in not just your traditional, these skills and these tools, in not just a traditional sense. And I think the second point I would make is I have noticed as I get bombarded with a lot of marketing initiatives, one thing that I would love to see from marketing that doesn't occur right now is an individualized, scalable message, right? Or individualized, scalable marketing. So many times I get an email that says, just the other day, I got an email from 2 different random companies that said, hey, I just got an email from you and we want you to click on this link. And it was like it said and then it had like a colon. It said, missed you on your email or something. I got the exact same message from 2 different companies, which tells me that they've taken technology and it just depended on technology, this email blast, in order to generate interest. And much like what Craig is saying, that customer voices, if I'm the customer, that is very important for you to know who I am. And I can't get past the fact if I'm an automated customer for you, that's hard for me to go spend my money elsewhere. So from a marketing perspective, in my industry, we certainly do a lot of those things where we use MailChimp and those kind of access things to automate emails. But if it's not an individualized message, it gets lost. And the hard part is doing that individualized, but keeping it scalable, keeping it under cost, and keeping it a valuable thing. So that's just kind of what I see, in my opinion, those 2 things for marketing at this point. So,
yeah, Travis, I just want to jump in and say thank you for that. When you're in MarTech, sometimes you forget how little of the marketplace is actually following those best practices, right? Just because you're on the forefront and you make sure that your database is tight, and if you're going to use personalization in a scalable, mass email, that it's being triggered correctly. There is a lot of white space in this industry for those companies that aren't doing it correctly. Marilyn and I were just having a conversation about this the other day, how, I'm so tired of getting that email that says, hi, my name is this, and I work for this company, and I want to sell you this. It doesn't work anymore, right?
Right. So I'm going to summarize and throw things. I'm hearing kind of business initiatives, being aware of the goals of the company. Also being aware of the client situation and personalizing as much as you can at scale. It's unfortunate on the sales side, because the sales side is your opportunity to personalize, but that's a different discussion. And then I'm hearing, aligning on those and delivering that, thinking about message internally as well as externally. Andrew McMasters, your face said you had something to add, and I don't want to hold you back.
My face says a lot of things. Travis, I really love actually what you had said about the sort of intrinsic versus extrinsic, sort of that having everyone inside your company. So it's sort of that internal marketing, making sure that everyone has that message as well as what's going out to customers. And that to me is one of those pieces I've seen lacking in so many different organizations I've worked with. And it's, when you mentioned it, it sort of crystallized it for me. I was like, oh yeah, that's great. Yeah.
All right, very good. I am going to move us to our next question, and that is, all right, why do you think marketing is held to a higher standard than, say, HR? Or are they? Let's challenge that if that's not true. There's a perception there. And so that'll be good. Glenn Hart, good to see you. There will be a link to the recording. It actually will be on LinkedIn, and you can just go back to this and you can see it. Eric Hosting, great to see you as well. All right, so I'm going to continue my question. I apologize. For example, there are no standard KPIs for good and bad hires, or are there in your company, if that's true, or retention that HR is responsible for? And so let's shift to everybody here. And let's start off with Andrew again. What are your thoughts around? I'll switch it up next time, Andrew. I won't always call on you first.
That's quite all right. I actually wanted to go back to something that Craig had mentioned too, and it was one of the only measurements that I had used actually running marketing for my company, which was churn. And I literally just wanted to know returning customers versus brand new customers, because what happened was I always found that returning customers weren't coming back and we were getting more new customers. And to me, that always said, great, our marketing's working, but there's something wrong if we're not retaining the people we have. So for me, that was the real KPI that helped us continue to move things forward. I think a lot of the other things that we were tracking as far as marketing were more about justifying why we're doing what we're doing than they were about actually doing the job. And for me, it was more of I want you actually doing the work as opposed to continuing to justify.
All right. I love your thought there because it's almost a percentage, right? Like you want,
So
is it
much of it, though.
60% or 75% is
So
current customers, 25% new or something like that?
I want to ask you something, Craig. How much time do you spend justifying what you do?
As little as possible.
I'll notice that that's a little bit like a percent.
Yeah.
Because you don't know how, there's no quantitative piece to that actually ties back to it.
I'm very fortunate to be in an environment where the products that I use, because I'm in the SaaS ecosystem, have those KPIs attached to them, right? So, Mike, I'm kind of glad that you took a step back there with the question, and because I was going to challenge this question, and I was going to say, increasingly departments like HR are now availing themselves of technology that allows them to measure their results. So in the larger organizations that I get to work with, there's a ton of metric-based decision-making happening across all different departments. So I think marketers were on the forefront of that. We're the ones that brought the data to the business ecosystem. And now everybody else is like, well, why aren't you using that? Okay, let me step. Finance was first. Always finance is first in terms of data. But we were the ones that brought intrinsic data, extrinsic data, looking at demographic and firmographic information, understanding the bigger picture, not just the numbers, right? And now that's being kind of ported out to other areas of the business, operations and HR and other places. So I was going to push back on that, but I will also say that for some reason, marketing is still held to a higher provable standard, and it's still more difficult for marketing to prove their value and their worth. And I'm going to attribute this mostly to anecdotal feeling and emotional decision-making versus analytical thinking and analytical decision-making. I think that a lot of CEOs think about marketing as a wishy-washy emotional thing. I think Andrew, as an actor, you can kind of, connect with that, right? That it, no matter how hard you try, you're never going to be able to measure the emotional response of an advertisement or a blog post. So I think we're still fighting an uphill battle of trying to prove that building the brand and having a cohesive voice and small psychological, efforts that we make to turn this button blue instead of green have a massive, major impact on the bottom line. So yeah, we are held to a higher standard, and one day I'm actually going to be able to go back and with a collection of, heat mapping and analytics and KPIs and dashboards, be able to definitively prove that this piece touched this customer and brought them all the way through the journey. But as of right now, it's still very challenging.
Right. When we talk about marketing, I think one of the reasons we struggle as an industry is that we overpromise on the idea of what can be measured, of like, you're going to know exactly what's going on. Well, you're going to know if 25% of your business comes through your website, you're going to understand that 25%. The other 75% that's through into your outbound sales efforts, yeah, you're going to have some insight. It depends if you pull in the CRM and you're measuring all of that, but that's a pretty big challenge for a medium-sized company. Yeah, so I think some of it is that we overpromise, and then of course people are disappointed, and so that's a mistake in my view. Travis, what's your response to what you're hearing?
Yeah, I mean, Andrew and Craig they nailed it on the head there. ROI is hard to measure. I as an executive, I want my cake and eat it too. I want this one shot that's going to fix out all my marketing problems, and all of a sudden sales are just going to rock and roll. So I go to my marketing guy and say, justify this. Please justify my $5,000 or $20,000 or $100,000 or whatever. So I think that those are just really interesting comments from both of you. I also know that there's a lot out there. MarTech, just one part of marketing is just immense. It's unbelievable what's out there. So that's a lot to manage. I think, and I know as a for me, I want to always be on that cutting edge. I want to have that next better thing. And so that's a really big challenge whenever marketing has always been that way, where they're always ahead of the game. And, HR in this case, I mean, it's harder to measure. And now we're starting to see that happening. So, which is something I'm doing at my company, is I'm measuring HR now. And then I think that at times, one thing that marketing gets held to a higher standard is sometimes ego. And what I mean by that is there are a lot of challenges in marketing, and you need to communicate those challenges to your executive. Everything is not rosy and everything is not perfect. Even though I'm looking for perfection and I'm looking for this one silver bullet that's going to fix everything, I think some of these further questions that you're talking about here, Mike, are really interesting, because ego can get in the way of, look what I did, look what we did as a marketing department, those kind of things. And sales does it too. Sales says, I just closed this huge deal, when in actuality, the truth is somewhere in the middle. It wasn't all sales. It wasn't all marketing. It wasn't, it was somewhere in the middle, where a collaborative effort and eliminating that ego and saying, hey, we got problems, we got challenges, we got things that we can improve on. That would also be something that sometimes happens whenever you do have a really solid marketing department. So just a little different perspective there from.
No, thank you. Marilyn, you had a follow-up question.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, that, we want to talk about the wins, because we're trying to justify, so we want to talk about the wins. We want to grab the wins. To go back to something you said that was very interesting, marketing is psychological, right? So as a marketer, what I'm trying to do is change hearts and minds, is understand your decision-making and influence and persuade that decision-making. That's what I'm doing as a marketer. That's squishy. Now we're trying to put analytics to it, and our MarTech now, we've got all of these measurements and whatever, but at the root of what we are trying to do is persuade hearts and minds, is to get our ideas of our brand into their mind and have them have certain thoughts about it and make certain mental connections to it and build trust, right? That's the root of all of it. And that's really squishy. And when you get into psychology and Andrew, I'm sure you know this, people learn differently, people process differently, people react differently. It's really squishy. So the whole idea that now we're trying to measure it and say, well, this button and that person, and the great thing that social media did, and social media did a lot of harm, don't get me wrong, but the great thing that social media did was sentiment analysis. We could suddenly look at, and it's not perfect still, but we could look at massive amounts of posts and garner sentiment. Now, sarcasm does kind of screw up the mix there, but I mean, that's one of the ways that social media has helped companies understand, what do people think? How do they react? How do they make decisions? Who influences them? Because it's super squishy.
Yeah.
And I think in this COVID environment where things maybe got a little tighter in general, with different companies, that whole, like Andrew was talking about, this justification. How hard is it to justify something that is squishy? It's hard. It's very squishy. And the pressure to justify it is bigger, at least in the COVID environment. And so, again, it's just that it's really interesting where we're at in a marketing world right now. So.
And it's so individual as well. I mean, the value proposition of a certain brand might be, for me, it's the price point. For someone else, it's the quality of it. For someone else, it's the color of it. So it's so individual what that value is to the individual. And yet we're trying to measure it across the same metrics.
Yep. So one of the things that I learned, sorry, allergies. One of the things that I learned when I was on QVC, there was this fascinating thing. When you're on QVC, you're talking to the camera, and you have the producer in your ear, and they are looking at what is being bought, what sales are coming in, what calls are coming in, what's coming in on the internet. But they're also looking at, and they used to pay for this, they're also looking at what is being searched on Google. So they paid Google to give them real live information of what's being searched on Google. So if I'm on camera talking about, flower gardens, what are people doing live? And the fascinating thing was the producer would be in my ear saying things like, touch that again, say that again, move there again. And he's saying it because he's looking at screens, reacting to what is happening in the sales, in the phone calls, and Google. That's freaking fascinating.
And that would just totally kill me. Because I can't, I could, if somebody's talking to my ear, I'm like completely listening to them and no longer talking to the audience. And I'd be like, hold on.
But
that's a skill, Marilyn. That's an impressive skill that you were able to do that. Let me just say that.
No, that's an example, though, of trying to react in real time to what your customer is doing and what they want. And, how many millions and millions of dollars they spent to make that system, to have that immediate feedback system. And you're talking about the individuals, right? So the individuals, what are the individuals doing? And sorry, maybe
so
that's
I'm going to close this, move to our next question. My thought is that I love Craig's point around measuring things and how it is. And we really won't be there until we get to the minority report where they can measure the dilation on your pupil when you look at something. And then it's going to be, that is a scary new world.
We're close.
So
you've seen hot jars.
We're there, but we're not. All right. So let's talk about what is the best way for marketing executives or the marketing team to talk to a CEO about marketing. And I'll give you guys a second to think about the Travis. I'm going to start with you on this one because I think you're the representative CEO, and then Craig, we'll get your perspective, and Andrew will have you follow.
So I kind of had three answers to this, but one is multiple mediums, multiple ways of communicating to me in a regular fashion, regular drumbeat or rhythm. I did play in the NFL. I have been hitting the head a lot. So having the same message sent to me a couple different ways, as well as on a regular basis, is really important, because as I'm starting to deal with a whole lot of different things coming at me as the senior executive here, I get a taste, and then I have to move on to another subject. I get a taste here, and if I have a regular drumbeat, I can start to understand as variables change and things like that. So multiple mediums or multiple medias and a regular drumbeat. Two is keep it high level. I think you guys have all heard this before, but answer the question, so what? Mm-hmm. We have 55,000 more clicks on my website. So what? What does that mean? What do I get? I don't get it, right? Help me connect the dots, because you may only get a handful of moments with me during a given week or day or whatever. And then finally, I kind of mentioned this before, but don't share just the good news. Let's talk to me about reality. Share those bad news. Share those problems. Sit there and go, I've got an issue. CEOs aren't scared. We shouldn't be that scary. I get it that the title is scary, but we're all after these. And you put this best, Mike, like goals, business goals and visions. That's what you help me with, and that's what gets help with. So don't talk to me just about the good stuff. I want to hear the problems and challenges, because we've got an organization of X amount of people that want to achieve these goals in business.
Well, and I think what comes to mind for me is, one, there's a cultural piece to this. That is your company a culture? I'm sure yours is, but I'm saying in general, is the culture of the company such that we can share challenges? Or is it that I constantly have to justify my existence at the company? Am I constantly in fear of my job being taken if I don't justify it? And that, obviously, there's a psychology piece that if you're constantly justifying by sharing only good news, one, honestly, audience, you are diminishing your value. because you're showing you're not enough of a business person to share the bad news and take the lumps and then talk about what you're going to do about and how you're going to solve that. But you're also sending the message that I have to justify myself. That people pick up on that subliminal message that you're not powerful enough to share bad news. And so you got to be willing to do that. That's just my view. But Craig Cook, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think that we've got, one style in Travis, and we've got one style in Mike, and then Andrew's got a different style. And this is something that we need to acknowledge, that it really depends on the CEO. Are they a numbers guy? Are they a big picture thinker? Perhaps they're a visual learner. If there's one thing that marketing has taught me, it's you got to know your audience, right? So knowing your audience and then reflecting back what's going to be effective to them is important. So the first 3 months you're in a marketing executive role, it's going to be a lot of experimentation, right? What's going to get through to the CEO? And then you should be able to hone that as you go forward. One CEO might want you to communicate everything in bullet points on a PowerPoint slides. Others might want dashboard KPIs to be the bulk of the conversation. We're educating our audience, but we also have to educate our internal audience, right? That's what we have to acknowledge, and it's not just the CEO, right? Everybody within your organization has to understand the impact that marketing has on the organization for you to be effective. Because it's great for you to be your own cheerleader, but it's even better when sales is coming to the CEO and saying, wow, what marketing provided to us really moved the needle on this deal. Or when customer service is coming and saying, marketing provided us with this great piece of collateral that we send out to disgruntled customers, and it's turning the tide for us. Or product comes to them and says, marketing reflected back some things that they were hearing from our ecosystem, and we're making some improvements, right? So it's great to be your own cheerleader and to have a presentation that you can give to the CEO, but it's even more effective when everybody in the organization is bought into what marketing is doing for them. And, we don't have to talk about ourselves. We shouldn't talk about ourselves. I didn't do anything. You guys did it all. I just gave you the tools to do it.
Oh, there you go. Love that.
Yeah.
Well done. All right, Andrew, you have to follow that.
Same. No, done. I'm out. Drop the mic. I think the same thing. It's sort of that, again, if everyone has sort of bought in like much of what Craig's saying, if we've actually got it across the organization, then that makes it so much easier. And I know for myself too, when I was asking for numbers from marketing, I really only wanted high level. So I guess it is that sense of what is going to appeal to that decision maker or to that CEO. I mean, for me, it was like 12/12 monthly moving average. That's all I want. So I want the biggest, highest level so that I can just sort of see where the big things are going. Great. I don't want the details because I have so many other details I got to worry about. So for me, yeah, it was that pieces. But I agree. If you've got everyone intrinsically in that organization bought into that message, then your work is done for you.
Nice.
And Travis, I just wanted to inject something for you. You said keep it high level, right? And I think that's very important for the C-suite, perspective, whether it's the CEO or the board of directors. But I want CEOs and boards to be more open to the story that marketing can tell by drilling down, right? That's something that I'm trying to really, push out into the marketplace as well. The buyer's journey is not a straight line, right? Mm-hmm. So surface KPIs are not an effective measure of success. With MarTech today, we do have analytics that can help you follow a single customer through their entire journey. And taking the time every now and again, not at every touch point, not once a quarter, but every now and again, taking the time to really go through that buyer's journey and drill down on how this person is interacting with our company across social, across video, across blogging and white papers and downloads and the emails that we send them. And then being able to bucket them into this is the behavior of this segmentation of our market and versus this is the behavior of this segmentation of our market. So yes, when communicating to the C-suite, you want to have that, high level presentation that kind of, gets in there. But I always encourage the C-suite to go back to marketing and say, I'm going to take, a day with you today, and we're going to really dig deep and understand what you do.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. In fact, storytelling to a certain degree, to me, is a high-level application of a concept that we're trying to communicate. And I think that's where I think you're spot on there, because I do want to see the KPIs and the numbers, but when I'm saying high level, it's like, oh, I get it, that this is who I care about, which is our customer, is dealing with all these different things. I love the storytelling because it's, again, digestible very quickly, quite frankly. It takes a lot of hard work to get to that level and to understand that. So I think that's a great point, Craig. Absolutely.
It's this is actually the structure they teach a lot of politicians. It's that sense of like, here's the big issue we're talking about, which is why I want to tell you about Timmy, who lives in Iowa, right? Because we got to talk about what that issue is, which is the minds, and then we go to the heart part, which is what Marilyn was talking about. We have to hit both, but the individual we can identify with, the issue is theoretical. So that's the mind part.
Right. And so if you can't, at the end of whatever you're doing, marketing or political, if they can't visualize Timmy in this case, you failed. They need to visualize Timmy in that plight, and that's what's going to engage them emotionally in that decision. That's fascinating. So I'm hearing really, I really appreciate Craig's point around like each CEO is different. And I like the idea of high level, but I think as a marketing person, my advice to everybody out there that's looking at this, go interview the CEO and say, one, make sure you understand the business initiatives for the year and that you can speak to those and how marketing can help with those. But go interview the CEO and say, hey, how do you want to get information? Because Travis is going to tell you, hey, send me lots of stuff and send it repeatedly. And he may or may not justify that with brain injuries, but we'll see where that goes. But I think those are really good points, that if you want to make a difference and grow your influence, you need to understand what is, and this is true for anybody in any company, period. What are the business initiatives? What is the top priority for the company this quarter or this year? How can you then contribute to that? And then share the challenges you're having rather than just the successes, partly because then you're going to get more support. Because if you go to the CEO and say, hey, I got this challenge, this is really not working because of this. I'm not trying to throw people under the bus, but I need help here. I think that can move some mountains for you. So we have 20 minutes left, and we are going to lose Andrew in 10. So I want to make sure Andrew we're going to start with you on this with our next question, which is, what are the words you least want to hear from marketing executives? So we'll start with that, and I'm going to pop us back out, and we'll take up this view. And Andrew, what are your thoughts? When you are in a leadership capacity, what don't you want to hear? I have my thoughts too.
I think mine is always I got a crazy idea. That tends to be it, because I'm also going, I love the crazy idea. That's wonderful. Let's talk about it. And where is this based on? And what is the thought process behind it? And what's the strategy? And what's the, as opposed to, I'm going to take our entire budget and we're going to have napkins at the baseball stadium. What? Right. So it's that sense of, I love crazy ideas. Give me sort of what the idea, or drill down what the idea is below that crazy idea, so that we can actually talk about that little nugget of it. So get to the base of it, what you were talking about, getting from your position to your interest. Tell me what the interest is, and then we can talk about that.
So I'm hearing, tell me the story of how this links back to our business goals.
Exactly.
How does that apply? Mm-hmm. So there was a company that here in the Colorado area that got funding, and they were spending, I don't know, 30 grand a month, and 10 grand was on LinkedIn, and they were not getting leads. And it's because they didn't look at the business initiative. They didn't look at the goals. They were just being really tactical and shooting. And yeah, it's terrible. So let's go on to Craig. What are your thoughts? What are either A, from your team as a CMO, or, just from your perspective, what are the words that you just don't want to hear?
SEO. I never want to hear that word again.
And by the way, your Google My Business page is out of date, and we can help you.
Yeah.
Look, let's acknowledge right now, SEO is fundamental to everything that we do as marketers, but SEO is about your audience. It's about having the right words on the page to communicate to the people you're trying to communicate to. The search engines will find you, okay? So yes, it's important to have a technical SEO deployment and background, and to make SEO a foundational principle. Like, you have to think about it when you're creating content. That's a given today. But I don't want to hear somebody coming to me and saying, I sell SEO services, because that doesn't mean anything today, right? I was selling SEO services 15 years ago. Back then it meant something, because you could game the system, and you could make Google do what you wanted it to do. But then it became gray hat and black hat, and for those not in the industry, that just means bad, right? It means bad practices that Google doesn't like, and they spent billions of dollars to combat that type of stuff. Today, it's about content. Content is king. So if you're speaking to your audience, the search engines are going to acknowledge that and recognize you. And if you're producing a large volume of content, they're going to recognize you more often. So stop thinking about SEO as something you can do and start thinking about SEO as something that just is all the time, right? And then the second thing from marketers, I'm probably going out on a limb here because marketing, like Marilyn and everybody kind of has pointed out, is an emotional, psychological thing. But I no longer like hearing I feel, I assume, I have a hunch, I think. I want numbers. I want data. I want you to be able to prove your theory. If you can't prove your theory, it just means you didn't do enough homework on it. It doesn't mean that it's not correct, right? It doesn't mean that your theory doesn't have value and isn't valid. It just means you're not closing the loop on why you believe this theory has merit, right?
That's such a great point. The way we make decisions is we make decisions emotionally. We have hunches. And then what we do is we go back and justify them.
That's right.
And you're just saying, hey, don't give me your hunch. Go back and do the justification before you bring it to me.
Yeah, you could say I thought, but then I went and proved it out. Like
Right.
that,
Here's
that's
the
better
data.
than this is what I think might happen. No, tell me what's going to happen when we make this, decision. And of course there could be a margin of error. And of course you can be wrong, but try to back it up with something concrete.
Right.
Craig, I'm going to take this section of the video and send it to my students.
That's great. There you go.
I'll be in the next textbook. That's cool.
There you go. All right. So keeping us moving forward, Travis, what are your thoughts? What do you? I actually have some thoughts on this, and I'll chime in after you do, unless you say what I'm going to say.
I think Andrew and Craig really hit the nail on the head there. One thing I hear is it's complex. This is a complex issue. This is complex for my marketing team, and I'm like, I'd rather hear this is our main line of effort. And what it goes back to is what Craig is talking about is think of marketing almost like in a scientific method. That there are things we're not going to know, right? It's okay to say I will find out. You don't want to say I don't know, but you want to say I'll find out. But it's about isolating those variables. That as you're having a conversation with a CEO or a C-suite and it is a complex situation or complex issue, I wouldn't want to hear it's complex. I want to say, here's where we're focused. The variable you're discussing or the variable that we have an issue with, it's something we got to figure out. But here's where our main line of effort is. And what that does is it kind of coalesces the folks that are listening to you around that one main line of effort, and then these other variables, as you isolate one variable, you can begin to test out, to make mistakes on other variables. So
I'm 100% in alignment. I think if you're a marketing professional, you are a communications professional. Your job is to take the complicated and explain it in simple, in a story, as we've done that. And if you're not doing that internally, you've let yourself down. The other part for me that stands out is a little bit of not my job. I don't really like that as, you're a marketing professional. If you want to be taken seriously, take yourself seriously enough that you're going to go to the people and figure out the solution to the problem, then go back and say, hey, here's what was going on. Here's what we did about it. Here are the results, rather than, hey, this is what's going on, and throw people under the bus. And so I just never think it's not your job. If it's a problem at the company and it's in sales, okay, go figure it out and help them make it happen. So there is that. All right. So I'm going to move us to our last question. Andrew, I'll start with you because we're losing you in exactly 3 minutes. He will disappear. So the pressure is on Andrew, and the question is, what behaviors should a marketing executive exhibit that demonstrate leadership that the C-suite will value? So Andrew, what you got for us?
Not a whole heck of a lot. I think, again, kind of going back to Craig's point on this, hopefully you've already sort of told the story to a point where it's going to be the value. And if it hasn't, then that means you haven't developed the relationship. How's that for the short and clear answer?
Very well done.
So good.
If I were a teacher, you get an A, but I'm not a teacher. All right, Travis, what are your thoughts? What behaviors do you want to see?
So Mike, you just touched on it, okay, and which is, I call it ownership is the way I would describe it. And I'm actually stealing that from Jocko Willink, former SEAL guy. I'm a Naval Academy guy. He calls it extreme ownership, but it's ownership. That whole "not my job," that is very challenging from any executive and really anybody in the company. But this ownership of all things that marketing touches, and what a big job that is. It's internal, external. It's a little bit of PR, right? It's a little bit of understanding, going out and understanding what your, in my case with industrial, what your operations team is dealing with. You know, I can go out and talk to any of my guys in the warehouses that we have across the country, and they know what's selling and what's not, and they know their customers and what's not selling. So talk about a challenge to be able to go from this high level brilliance of MarTech, and then also get to the ground truth of what's going on in a business. That is a huge swath of stuff. So ownership is what I would. I'm stealing that, but I'd call it that. I love collaboration is another behavior that has just got to be something that's happening or as a regular organic thing. And then I love it when my finance team and my marketing team understands the greater finance. It's really impressive. Now I got to make sure that they know what they can spend and what they can't, right? So that's always great. And the final is be accountable, be self-critical. You know, again, it kind of goes back to what I said before. Hey, if it's a problem, look internally first and go, what can I do, or what can my team do better to fix this situation, rather than say it's not my job, it's somebody else's job, play the blame game or whatever. Not that I see that too much, but it does happen, especially when you get pressure. And a lot of what we've been through in the last year has been exactly that, which is pressure.
All right, very good. Andrew, thank you. It is now, I think you're out. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much. So nice to meet everybody.
Andrew.
I'm sorry to have to
You
jump.
too, Andrew. Pleasure to meet you.
Talk to you later.
No worries. Have a great day. All right, Craig, what are the behaviors that you think people just darn well should avoid?
So I think my thunder is definitely stolen on this one. Travis and Andrew hit it on the head with storytelling, number one for me. If you can't effectively tell the story of not just the brand, but of your customers, and be the voice of your customer to the C-suite and to the rest of the organization, I think you're not going to be an effective marketing executive or marketing employee. So that's my number one. Number two, I think today, increasingly, you have to have an analytical mindset. You have to be able to really drill down and understand the implications of KPIs and the numbers and what it means to the bottom line. Number three is you have to be revenue driven. It's not just sales that's responsible to revenue, it's marketing, right? Mm-hmm. So if you're not creating measurable impact and attributing some of that ROI back to your efforts, then you're not being responsible to the bottom line of an organization. Number three, I think today you need to have really strong technical foundations. I think you need to know just enough to be dangerous in all areas, even if you're a master of none, right? Mm-hmm. But you need to have that oversight on the developers who are working on, your MarTech projects. You need to have that oversight on the CSS and the HTML that's being deployed on your website. You don't have to be an expert, but you have to know enough to be dangerous and to be able to guide the people underneath you to go in the right direction. It's their job to get it 100% right, but sometimes you got to guide them and get them there by saying, well, try it this way instead of that way, and maybe it's an easier path for you to go, and it's not going to be as challenging. Accountability was another one, and well-roundedness, I think, rounds it out as again, kind of having your finger in every pie and just being able to have an opinion on and feedback and touch back on things that are out of the purview of marketing. Because again, if you're the voice of the customer, you should be influencing decisions well outside of your department.
Absolutely.
And your voice should be heard. And today, the topic is having a seat at the table. This is having a seat at the table. And it's not just the big dinner table in the C-suite, But as a marketer, we should be pushing to have a seat at every table within the organization and make sure that we're reflecting the voice of the customer, and that our customer service, our product, our sales, our logistics, our packaging, everything that we do is a cohesive and focused strategy to the end game.
All right, so I have to start with no one stole your thunder. That was brilliant. Repackaged, but no, that was awesome. So my thought is that you talk about having a seat at every table, and I think if you really want to be taken seriously at that C-suite table, you need to take seriously everybody across the organization and be at every table and solve problems at every table, because then you're going to become really irreplaceable at that point. And so then of course you're going to be taken seriously. So take yourself and your work seriously, I guess that's my thought there. The other piece, though, I think it's not lost on me that if you think about what you just described in terms of a job, like the qualities that a successful marketing leader needs to have. You talked about comfortable with analytics and data, which means spreadsheets or maybe Tableau or whatever that is. You also need to have, we've talked a lot about being able to tell compelling stories, understand psychology, help people, be persuasive is another piece of this, and turning the complex into something simple and or understandable at least. And then on top of that, you need to be able to oversee all these technical efforts. And that sort of aligns with the spreadsheet piece, but also doesn't, because CSS is not a spreadsheet. And getting your website, that's all about loading your website quickly, being able to measure that and look at that. That's a pretty complicated skill set and few and far between. Craig, I'm sure you're the person that it is. I'll say I know enough to be dangerous. No, really, that's a complicated skill set. And I think it asks a lot from a marketing department. So that's something, as your people out there in the world are looking at your development, those are things you should be thinking about, is like, how do you build that cross functional skill set? Because there's not one piece there that's not important.
And one of the
biggest, you're not going to be 25 and have that, right?
Oh God.
You're not going to be just out of school and have that, even if it's your goal and it's your pursuit. I'm in my 40s and I learn every single day, and I constantly push the boundaries, and I'm building upon foundation that's been set for 15, 20 years.
Right.
And so don't expect it to happen overnight. But especially if you're aiming for the C-suite and you're aiming for a seat at the decision-making table, you've got to have strong foundation and strong fundamentals, and you got to build on that every day.
Yeah. I'm going to go back to what you said about research. Yes, there is a lot of data that we have access to, but I feel strongly that you have to filter that data and taking all that data in through the strategy and the goals, the overall goals of the company, because data means nothing if you can't extract what is most important. And the only way you're going to do that is to understand the goals of the company and the marketing strategy. What is the strategy? Because it's just tons of information that's just nice to know. What do you need to know? And once you know what you need to know, then you can tell the right stories.
I love that. And I think the piece for me, I think this is where marketers can undercut themselves, is they will send out irrelevant data. It is not tied to the business goal. Well, you can get more clicks. I've been in meetings where they're talking about clicks, and you talked about that, Travis. So I've been in those same meetings.
I have, yes.
Who cares about the number of clicks on your website? Are they the right companies? Are they the right people? Are they converting? All of that data, how does that tie back to our business goal? And so there's a lot there, but I think you need to be really careful about what you're presenting as data, and don't take data that's not seriously. Like, go ahead.
Oh, there's a quote, Mike.
That's a great point, Mike. I just want to amplify what Craig was saying. I mean, talk about learning every day. I mean, a guy who's been doing this for a while, and obviously you get it in so many different ways. I mean, even today, I'm learning from you, Craig, and I learned from Andrew and Mike. I learned from you, Marilyn. I learned from you guys. I mean, it's the information out there is unbelievable, and to get your arms around it is tremendously hard. You can't do it in one day. It's got to be a passion over the course of time. And me as a CEO, I can see it. I can taste it when my marketing department is out there stretching their wings, trying to learn or try something different or learn something different. You can taste it. And you know what? I feel very confident when that's occurring, that we're going to be okay for the future, So I just thought that was a big point there too.
Yeah, I would encourage people. So this is how I think about it. And of course, I think I'm smart. So you have to decide for yourself if I'm smart. But I would encourage you, think through, not just like learn everything. What is critical for your role and what you're doing for the next 3 to 6 months? And where are you going to be learning so that 6 months from now, you're ready for the challenge you're going to be facing? Now, that's a hard question to answer, but there's some pieces to that. And certainly you've got some guidelines around the tech, the psychology, I've got the analytics piece of this. You probably have gaps there, and those will be challenges in 6 months, and they're only going to increase. So if you're not spending time on LinkedIn Learning or wherever you spend your time learning, you should get to it now, because the challenges are coming. So think through, what do you need to learn? Because there's just not enough time to learn everything. Even if you just look at SEO, which Craig never wants to talk about again, there's not it's so complicated that you can never learn it all. Even people at Google don't necessarily understand it all. So, okay, we are just about done. I am going to quickly just do a quick promotion again. Brooke, if you don't mind sharing that, we do have our webinar series, and this time we're going to be doing the strategic lead generation for the middle market company. That'll be Tuesday, May 11th. I think that's about just exactly 2 weeks from today, 10 a.m. Mountain, 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern. And so there it is. Please join us if you can make it. Thank you guys for coming. I really appreciate Travis,
so much, Craig and
Andrew.
Travis.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. Nice to meet you, Craig.
Nice to meet you.
All right. Very good. All right, folks, everybody have a great day. We're going to send you off. Have a good day.
Thank you so much for coming.